Okay, so now it's time to call the Urbana City Council meeting to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons.
Here.
Mr. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Jacobson.
Here.
Mr. Madigan. Ms. Marlin.
Here.
Mr. Roberts. Mr. Smythe.
Here.
Mayor Pressing.
Here. The first item is approval of the minutes of the previous meeting, October 19th, 2015.
So moved.
Motion by Ammons,
I'll second.
seconded by Brown. Any additions or corrections? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. Are there any additions to the agenda? Don't see any. Petitions and communications? Okay. Bishop King James and Reverend Dr. Evelyn Underwood do not wish to speak. However, they are continually concerned about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer problem, for the record. Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to address the Urbana City Council? Don't see anyone. Unfinished business, ordinance number 2015-10-105, an ordinance revising the fiscal year 2015-2016 annual budget for METCAD funding. Diane Marlin.
Yes, would still express support for fully funding our and paying our METCAD bill. As we've stated, as has been mentioned in the past, a couple of factors entered in here. One is the council really wasn't, I think, fully aware of the shortfall in the budget when we considered and passed the budget back in June. We do have a signed agreement in an intergovernmental agreement, and I do think it's important that we meet our obligations to the other funding partners. We can pay this bill now, or we can pay it over time, possibly with interest. We're not going to save money by putting this off, and I think, in my opinion, we should be paying it now. And I do fully support the effort to change state law to bring the 911 METCAD funding up to speed with the way technology is today, and I'm happy that the increase in METCAD fees has been reduced for next year, but at this point I fully support paying this bill now.
Charlie, could you take over?
Sure. Mayor?
As I reported to you, I think it was last week, we met with the City of Champaign, and they are willing again to let us spread these payments over 5 years. The current financial plan is unsustainable, and I have been telling the METCAD board that for several years. So I've been working on the underlying problem of insufficient funding, and it is not just Champaign County, it is the whole state of Illinois, with the possible exception of Chicago now, because they were given the right to go to $3.90. Our voters did approve $1.50, but the legislature voted a temporary 87 cents. We have a commission in place for 2 years, and I would like us to ask our legislators to ask that commission be directed to look at the financial impact on local governments. And I've talked with people from around the state, and this is a truly statewide problem. As a result of not paying the full amount. We did get the city of Champaign to agree to not only stretch this out over 5 years, which they did when we got the initial 28% increase. And I will remind you that the city of Champaign only had a 1% increase, the way we had to reconfigure the operations at MetCat in order to get Rantoul included. But they also have agreed to lower the 16% that they were planning for next year to 6.5%. So they really have agreed to this concept that we should make it a more gradual increase than these huge increases. Like the county got a 55% increase. So I think that this motion is really inappropriate at this time and certainly unnecessary. So I'll take the chair back.
Mayor?
Eric?
I'm intending to support the motion. I don't believe, as I understand the finances, it isn't going to really be in our, it's a wash. It isn't going to be in our long-term financial interest to stretch the payments out. We will have to pay the money. I guess the cost to us would be the opportunity cost of reducing the amount of our reserves that are invested. On the other hand, presumably, we're going to have to borrow the money to make the payments later on, in which case, you know, the opportunity cost goes the other way. But what I'm really concerned about is that this is really abrogating an agreement that everybody involved entered into in good faith. And I'm very concerned about the effect on other governmental agencies' assessment of Urbana as a reliable partner in intergovernmental agreements. We have many problems that we're facing and will be facing down the road that are more regional in nature, that are not confined to Urbana. We have a major issue with respect to criminal justice and with respect to beefing up our substance abuse and mental health abilities to account for those people who should be shifted in that direction. We have to join in with other governmental agencies in the continuing efforts on preserving the Mahomet Aquifer. We won one round on that, but that's going to be an ongoing fight. In all of these cases, we are going to have to join with other governmental agencies, and I think that we need to demonstrate that agreements that we do join into, we will satisfy our obligations.
Charlie?
I'm not going to support this ordinance. I think that a long-term plan has been worked out with the MetCat board, so I think this is premature. I agree with the mayor that the increases have been unsustainable, and given the state of the state budget and the finances that aren't flowing in our direction, we need to preserve our own cash reserves. So, you know, if we've got extra money laying around to pay this, we should probably instead be putting that money towards mental health and issues like that if we have extra money. But as far as I know, we don't have any extra money, and we need to be holding on to every penny that we can until the state clears up its own mess. And hopefully, sometime next year, we can also clear up the whole 911 funding issue as well, which is just totally, as the mayor's put it, is as a state is not sustainable with the unfunded mandates to us to the cities in the state in the state. So I can't support this at this time. Though
Aaron?
I'm happy to say, we've agreed to pay the bill. We just can't pay it all at once, and we're going to pay it over time, which we've done before, and I see no reason not to do that.
Aaron?
I wanted to ask a question first before I make my comments. In relationship to the 16% increase, the original understanding prior to your negotiations, we were set to pay 16% next year. Is that correct?
Right. The City of Champaign is the lead agency, and they did the budget, and they had projections for, maybe 10 years out. And they were planning to do 16% next year, and they've offered to lower it to 6.5%, which I think is very helpful because all these governments are facing a real crisis because of the state's inability to forward our revenue to us.
So over the 5-year period, I think we talked a little bit last time at the Committee of the Whole about what that interest would be over the 5 years. Do we have an exact number on that?
I think it was something like $160 a year, something like that.
So basically
It's
almost,
very small.
so somewhere around $700 if my math is correct, somewhere in
Right. And
that
it's-
area.
Yeah, and they haven't even voted on that. This is something that Champaign talked about. We didn't get charged any interest when we spread out the initial 127,000. We added the 127,000 to this year. All we're trying to do is keep our spending growing at the same rate that our revenue grows. That's essentially what we're trying to do here.
And so the, from 16% down to 6.5%, do you have any idea how much that would save us next year?
I think it's going to save us about $90,000.
So the negotiations that you entered after the original negotiation will ultimately save us $90,000 because of the 10%, but cost us maybe $700 in interest if we stretch it out over 5 years. Is that correct?
The 700 is for what they wanted us to pay this year.
Right.
So next year, we just won't have to, they won't bill us for as much as they were originally planning to bill us.
So
So it just
clearly-
makes the whole thing easier for us, and it makes the whole thing easier for every government that's involved in MetCAD.
So clearly the support from Champaign and MetCAD and our other partners recognized our concerns and saved us far more money than it was going to cost us. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay, so that's the first point. Now, this issue about us being seen as partners, I think I've had this conversation with some council members before. I don't think you're going to take one or two situations when we are cash-strapped or really trying to deal with the issue around Carl that no other entity has to deal with to the degree that we do. I don't think that us trying to recover from that and deal with that is somehow making us bad partners because of one situation or this situation that we find ourselves in. So I don't find that to be a credible argument for us to be making here in relationship to how we'll be seen as partners. If there's a long-term, if there's a history of us not doing things or not doing things the way we were supposed to prior to me getting here or whatever, then that would be more understandable. But to take this and try to use it as some means to say that we will be seen as bad partners, I think is disingenuous. So I would not be supporting this motion.
Bill?
Yeah, I'll support this. I just think it's more sound financial management to pay your bills when you've already used the services. Nothing's going to go down next year. It's only going to go up. It's still going up 6% plus the increase we got this year. So we'll be basically pushing off tough budget decisions to councils in the future for the next 4 years and just adding on to their burden, instead of trying to make the choices ourselves and setting our own priorities. So I would rather just pay it when it's due.
Anyone else? Would the clerk please call the roll? Oh, I thought you had a motion, sorry.
No, I'll move approval of ordinance number 2015-10-105.
Second.
Okay, motion by Marlin, seconded by Jacobson. Any other discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
No.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin,
Yes.
Mr. Smythe.
No.
That motion fails. It needed 6 votes in order to pass. Okay, the next item is my veto of resolution number 2015-09-056R, and this was a modification to the existing contract with the University of Illinois for fire service. We had an amount in the contract which hasn't changed over many years, and it was for non-personnel items, and it was supposed to be changed with a factor that the state legislature would come up with every year, but they haven't done it for, I think it's 10 years. And so an alternative was discussed, which was some kind of a statewide average, and in my veto message, I gave you a comparison of the state average with what just MetCAD has been increasing. And for 2013, the state average that they are talking about was 1.7 or 1.8% roughly, and MetCAD for us went up 28%. For 2014, it was 1.8%, and ours went up 18%. So we have an ongoing discussion with the University of Illinois. I think this arrangement of us having a fire station on the campus and serving the campus area as well as the rest of Urbana has worked out very well for both sides. But I think this contract was drawn up in 1998, I believe, and we're just trying to review it and see if it needs to be updated. So that's the reason I vetoed it. I think it's premature to come up with a number at this point until we look at some of the other questions as well as this factor for inflation. Charlie?
Mayor, I have a question for you then. So we have an existing contract. This is only an amendment to that contract. Is that the way?
Right. This is taking something that was pegged to an annual increase that was pegged to some number that was supposed to be generated by the legislature. They haven't done it for 10 years, so that number has stayed the same for 10 years with no inflation factor. And the initial discussion was about the state average that's compiled by the Illinois Municipal League for all rural fire departments, I guess, as well as urban ones. I'm not real sure where it comes from, but it obviously is out of sync with what we're facing. So I think this requires more discussion before we vote on something.
So to follow up then, have you opened up new negotiations with the university then?
Yeah, I've talked to Mike DiLorenzo about this. They came over and talked about it with us, and so we just want to make sure we understand all the facets of the contract and see how we both benefit from it. We're not trying to say that we don't want a contract with them. We're just saying, since this one factor is so out of date, let's take a look at everything and come up with a factor that's makes sense from an accounting standpoint and is fair to both sides.
Okay. So, but for the time being, we have a contract. There's nothing.
That's right.
nothing
There's
under-
no interruption in the contract. This does not change the contract. This was a proposed change to the contract, and I am suggesting that it's premature.
Okay. Thank you.
So your choice would be to do nothing, which is the worldwide ever popular choice, but or to vote to override my veto. Diane?
I have a question for the chief. Nightliner? It sounds like what's really driving this proposal is the huge increase in MetCAD fees. So what I was wondering is there any chance that reopening the discussion on this amendment could actually have a negative impact on the main contract itself? I mean, it sounds like we really have a very good contract in place, but is there a chance that if we start this discussion, it could have a
Well, the contract has really been effective, in all the years it's been that we've been entered into the contract. I mean, it's fully funded 16 people for the fire department, with 12 of those on campus, a fire inspector, and then 3 of them serving the city on the ladder truck. So it's fully funded at 100%, and it continues to. I mean, that's not going to change. I think the point of contention is the non-personnel stuff. And in reviewing the non-personnel stuff the last few days, the capital fund that's involved in that is funded right at 50% in looking at the numbers. And I've been researching the history of the contract and some of the original documents, and that appeared to be the goal from the beginning, to fund the capital, which is the fire truck, the maintenance, and the insurance. The station is provided, 100% maintained by the U of I. Materials and supplies appear to be funded 100%. The part that's lacking is the operations part of it, which is the MedCAD fees. And I think due to the large increases the last couple of years, that's fell behind. So that's the part that we're still working on. And I know our next meeting that I've got with the U of I officials, Mike DiLorenzo and Craig Grant, is on the 17th, and we're going to continue the discussions on the MedCAD part. So that's probably the biggest thing, is the MedCAD part. The everything else seems to be fairly well in line with the goals. I mean, obviously they're not funding a fire truck 100% for us, but that station runs about half of its calls to campus building, and the other half of the calls are non-campus buildings. So that part appears to be balancing out fairly well.
Like, I guess, so is it possible to figure out the MedCAD issue without reopening this whole amendment process? Can that be a separate discussion, or does it have to be part of this?
That was the desire when I first took it to Mike and Craig, was to come up with another figure, to increase the budget annually and replace the continuing components portion of it. That was the intention, and their intention was to handle the MedCAD part separately. But MedCAD part is part of this non-personnel. I mean, it's definitely a part of that figure on the operations part of it, but their intention was to work on that separately from the other. And then that's the way they're approaching it so far.
Well, so if the U of I's intention is to work on it separately, and our intention is to include it, who gets to say what, who gets to make that decision or that call?
I guess at this point they are. I mean, because I think their motivation to give us the increase is the service that we provide them. I mean, they were contractually bound to give us an increase, but they understand that we were getting shortchanged because we hadn't got an increase in such a long time. So I think that's why they got us the increase they got us, and although it falls short of 16% MedCAD increases. But it seems to be keeping pace on a lot of the other things.
So if we stayed with the resolution we passed a couple of weeks ago, the work on a more reasonable MedCAD fee would still continue, in your opinion?
Well, that's the intention. That's what our next meeting's about, to continue working on the MedCAD fee.
So if I understand rightly, the immediate effect of the veto would be actually to take the contribution of the University of Illinois back to the flat would be back to the flat level that it was.
Right. It would be keeping it with the continuing components
Right.
fee.
And but in your judgment, and based on what you're saying about the, MedCAD discussions, the discussions about how to deal with the MedCAD increase, that's still on the table, and there are continuing discussions about that.
Yes, yeah. The new proposal in the Second Amendment, although they're small increases, starts the increase pattern back up.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the increases historically have been, prior to that continuing components go away, between 2% and 3% was about the average that we got annually. And so This new figure, they say would be 1.8% starting July 1st of 2015. And as far as the MedCAD thing goes, they want to negotiate that separately, and the question is, do we continue to do that or make that part of this?
Mhm. Okay. I guess I'm at a loss as to see what we gain by rejecting the increase they're proposing for the purely service component that's independent of the MedCAD increases.
Charlie?
Yeah, so, I'm at a loss to figure out whether we need to maintain some level of negotiating strength by not approving this amendment. And so, if negotiations are ongoing, basically what we could either roll it into this second amendment, or we could have a third amendment that puts MedCAD in a separate category, and I'm just very confused to which way to do that. Do we, we might be laying all our cards on the table if we go forward with approving this amendment. On the other hand, if the university continues to bargain in good faith, then we should just approve this amendment and keep at the MedCAD piece of this. So I really don't know what to do.
Okay, we have a motion by Marlin, seconded by Jacobson. Is that correct? No motion?
Not yet.
Well, I guess I associated with the last one for some reason. I don't know why. Okay.
Well, I'll move passage of the resolution under discussion.
Actually, what we have is a veto.
Or, well,
So if you want to override a veto, you need to
Okay,
make a
I'll-
motion to override.
I'll
perfectly good
move a whatever the right word is if resolution is strong enough, I'll move a resolution to override the veto. If I need a stronger word than that, I would request the clerk to provide that.
I think it's just a straight motion. Yeah.
That's it? Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'll move to override the veto. Okay.
Well, I'll second.
Motion by Jacobson, seconded by Marlin. Any other discussion? Mr. Ammons.
No, go ahead, Mr. Madigan.
Well, I'm just curious, maybe I'm not reading this right, but it is, if we override your veto, doesn't this still allow for further negotiation for amendments, but it actually can confine the discussion to a more narrow conversation?
No, what it does is say that you approve this and you still want to negotiate about it. And, of course, my position is that you should keep negotiating until you find something that you really can approve.
Okay, but there's an amendment process
Right, but,
that's established, okay.
you know,
So
if
there's
you
an
want to do
amend-
a series of amendments, that would be one thing, but I think you are losing negotiating power.
Well, I
Yeah.
guess here's
So
where I'm
that's my
coming.
rationale.
Okay, if I may finish. I think here's my, my thought process here. There is the ability for the university to maybe even backtrack to a greater degree than we're even contemplating here because of their inability to receive state funds. So couldn't this situation even be exacerbated if we leave everything on the table? But if we in a friendly way, override your veto.
I would not consider it friendly,
Well-
just to make it
No,
clear.
just for the sake of conversation, I'm just
Right.
wondering,
Okay.
is there another way to get at this? And I think that's what Charlie was trying to drive at.
Well, I think that when you're in negotiations, you wait until you get a mutually satisfactory conclusion for both sides, and that's what I'm saying. I think that this particular suggestion is premature because I think we have more negotiating to do. And this is, for the university's budget, you know, this is pretty small potatoes, so it's more important to us than it is to them.
Yeah, but the
I
crazy
think-
thing is they've already picked all the low-hanging fruit, and now all the small potatoes are adding up.
Well, they're,
When-
you know, they get very good service from us. They've gotten very
No
good
question.
value, so I don't think they want to disrupt that.
Well, I would agree with that, but I'm just wondering if narrowing the discussion in negotiations wouldn't be a good thing for the city.
Okay, Aaron?
I know I'm new at this, but I'm thoroughly confused. And it sounds like this is a conversation that we should be having upstairs instead of right here to me. I don't know. Am I wrong about that, City Attorney?
I'll have to admit I will have to consult the Open Meetings Act and see whether this fits into an exemption. My gut reaction, without having done the research, is it does not. However, there is a contract in place, and on the table is a proposed amendment. If you choose to bifurcate that amendment in an effort to approve, by an amendment to the proposal, but you're on a veto override. You're not currently addressing the agreement or the amendment itself. But at some point, if you were to try to bifurcate, you're still back on the amendment to square one because the amendment has been proposed by the university. And I think your real question, it's a policy decision for you all, is whether you believe the university will negotiate in good faith. And from what I understand, and speaking with Chief Neitlinger, they have been negotiating in very good faith. They're trying to resolve a situation that they recognize as a problem as well. But that's a call for you all to make, how you want to finally resolve this particular issue that's on the table now.
So my understanding thus far is that there's a contract, and we are reopening the entire contract?
No.
No, so we're just addressing.
No, you've
one-
got a contract in place. The contract allows, by its own terms, for amendments. An amendment has been proposed, separate from this bifurcation, all that. If you if you reject the amendment, i.e., in this case, fail to override the veto, the underlying contract continues, just as it's currently written.
So I
If
don't-
you override the veto, then the contract is amended per the proposed amendment.
So I don't understand how, or what are we concerned about losing? Chief, can you come back, please? And I'm just trying to understand as thoroughly as possible before I vote. So from what I'm hearing is that there's a contract reopener basically for this one issue around MedCAD. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's on non-personnel costs. Okay, so
Non-personnel
yeah,
costs.
our personnel costs are funded 100% whenever our costs go up, whenever we give raises or pension cost increase or work comp. We let the university know what those costs are, and they meet them 100%. The non-personnel side, the way it increased was by this continuing components,
Mhm.
which went away. And so their proposal is a new method, a state average, to increase that continuing components, which includes the MedCAD fees. And where the problem came in, the MedCAD fees are increasing 16+%, and the state average this year will only be 1.8%. So that's where and the university recognizes that. That's why they're continuing to talk about the MedCAD fees.
And the MedCAD fees go up every year.
Yes. I don't know that they've ever went down.
No, I'm just saying, but
Yeah,
it's not,
yeah.
it's not
Right,
like it
correct.
skips a year or two or whatever. It just seems to
Right.
be going up year
Yeah.
after year.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a 16% increase.
It has been zero,
It has been zero before,
but
okay.
now it's rocketing up.
18, 17, 28, 18.
18, yeah.
And
And
it
so,
takes-
in a contract negotiations, as we go back and forth, you get offered something, you determine whether or not you feel like it's fair or not. But in this reopener, are you saying that they can go back?
Well,
Or they
there-
can just offer the rate that they were offering initially?
Yeah, there's three signees to the contract, the city of Urbana, the city of Champaign, and the university. So at this point, the city of Champaign and the university have agreed on this amendment. If we change the amendment, then all three entities will have to agree on it.
And so if we were to negotiate for more or for a better arrangement, then of course Champaign would sign again, right? You know, it makes sense, right?
I would hope.
I just wanted to make sure I'm clear
Yeah.
about what it is that we're
All right.
talking about. And
Yeah.
the MetCat fees is the non-personnel issue that we're discussing.
Yes.
And this is for how many years?
The contract continues every year until one of the signers of the contract decides that, they either want to have it changed or they want to get out of the contract. So the contract just perpetuates.
So at this point, if we were to override the veto and accept the offer, the 1.8 or whatever it is that the university is offering as an increase, we could have this same conversation in a year or however, maybe even shorter than that, if indeed this 10-year piece that you're talking about, Mayor, comes back into effect and the numbers are renegotiated and recalculated, right?
Once the contract is changed to a different formula, then that formula perpetuates every year. Whatever that formula is what the increase is.
Okay.
I would like to point out that we have a separate agreement with the city of Champaign, which apparently they have not been following. So we have a discussion with Champaign later this month. So that's another reason why I want to hold off on this until we get all this stuff straightened out. Bill?
I don't have the original agreement in front of me. I think in your memo you said what the total dollar amount of impact for the year would be. Do you remember approximately what that was?
A little over $1,900 increase on the continuing component. It's at I think 107, 775 now, and it takes it up to 109.
So the 1.8% is just on the non-personnel costs, and that's
Yes.
supposed to cover depreciation on equipment, all that sort of
Supplies,
things. Okay.
physicals, training.
And NetCAD.
Yeah, MetCat.
So we're talking about $1,900.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I would point out that our requested increase in MetCAD was $94,000, so $1,900 doesn't go too much toward covering that, or even half of that. Okay, we have a motion. Oh, okay, Diane?
If you are able to renegotiate a more reasonable fee to cover MedCAD services, what would be the amount that the fire department would receive? It wouldn't be $94,000. What would be the optimal outcome from your university negotiations with the university to increase the MedCAD fee?
Our negotiations right now involve a discrepancy between the number of calls that we have in our records that we run at U of I buildings and MetCAD's records. Right now, our records don't match. So we're trying to reconcile those records, and as soon as we get a firm number on the number of calls we run to U of I buildings, then the university is going to make a proposal on how to handle that. But we haven't agreed on the numbers to this point.
Is it tens of thousands, or you have an idea?
Probably 10 to 20,000.
Okay, so that's
That's the range.
the gap there.
Yes, on the fire side.
Oh, so, just to.
Oh, sorry.
Uh,
Eric?
So just to clarify, I'm going to restate what you said and make sure I've got it right, that the university has agreed in principle to cover the fire department's component of the METCAD increase, but you don't have the numbers yet. And as soon as you have a basis for the numbers, it looks to you as though the university will be agreeable to modifying the agreement further to take that into account.
Yeah, they stated that their goal is the METCAD fees that we pay on their behalf, they want to be a pass-through on our budget. So they want to fund
Yeah.
the fees that we pay on their half 100%.
Do you think this sets a precedent for sort of separating out the other METCAD, the other personnel costs from the METCAD costs? Because it does seem as though they don't really bear a relationship to each other. There's no relationship between what happens to METCAD and how much more a fire truck costs.
Correct, and some of the notes that I looked at, they agreed in actually '97 on some firm fixed figures for this non-personnel, and then this escalator of the continuing components, and the documents that I read from that time, that was the agreement. They decided it was going to be a fixed cost. The continuing components would escalate it, and I don't think at that time anybody realized there would be increases in the METCAD portion of that to the degree they are now.
Anyone else? Okay, we have a motion by Jacobson, seconded by Marlin.
I had another question. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Aaron, go ahead.
I'm still trying to understand this completely. So the 1.8% that has been offered at this particular point, is that their initial offer?
Yes, yeah, and that 1.8% is just what the municipal league has noted as the increase in the cost of fire protection for last year. I mean, that could be a different percentage next year, just depending on what the average cost of fire protection goes up in the state. So they've worked that off an average cost from the municipal league. So it just happens to be 1.8% this year.
So clearly, university knows that METCAD increase is far more than 1.8%, though.
Yes. Yeah, I pointed that out, and that's why they're continuing the discussions on the METCAD portion of that.
So if we override this veto, there would still be a continued discussion on the METCAD fees.
Yes, yeah.
We hope.
Yeah, I mean,
But if we override the veto, university could walk away from the table and say, we don't want to continue discussions on METCAD.
yeah, it just depends what would motivate them to continue the discussion.
I don't think they're threatening us,
Yeah.
right? They're willing to talk about it, so.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Okay, Steve Doggett, I think you wanted to talk.
Good evening. How's everybody tonight?
All right.
Good?
Wonderful.
I'll keep this brief. We've talked quite a bit about this topic, and I just wanted to voice some concerns about the contract and the amendment specifically. First, I want to say thank you, because you guys have been phenomenal supporting the fire department throughout the years that I've been here. I'm the president of the local 1147, for those that haven't met me. And I just wanted to address some concerns, specifically from our membership. After the last council meeting, my phone took off at finding out what was going on with this amendment. And there were a lot of concerns, because we always want to make sure that our working conditions, that our jobs are safe, especially with U of I, because that's very important to us. We pride ourselves on the fact that we get to represent the University of Illinois. Excuse me. Respectfully on those concerns, we do also acknowledge that you guys have the issue of the rising METCAD fees. First, I do commend you for all of your work trying to reduce those fees and working on them to address that problem, because it is a problem, and we acknowledge that as well. That being said, based off of the information that I've had, I've worked with Chief Neitlinger on and off between May and now, and especially the last 2 weeks I've worked with him on this topic. Based off of the information that I've worked with him, there are concerns that vetoing this bill, or I'm sorry, excuse me, letting this bill be vetoed could directly affect our relationship. There are concerns based off of the fact that it gives an impression of what we're doing. We're going in and asking for money. Mr. Ammons, you had made comment that there may not be any opportunity after, if we were to veto the bill, that they would come back. There's also no necessarily reason that they would offer that 1.9%, 1.7%, whichever it was, if we turn this down. And that is a concern, because especially with the state budget, as it is right now, they're making cuts, and we're getting an increase. We want to support our chief. I think the plan that he has presented is a good plan, with the understanding that all of the information that we have is accurate, that we are moving forward with that increase with complete intention to focus on the METCAD bills, because that is a very big issue for us. And again, we do recognize that. We do identify that as an issue. So again, to keep this short, we do support the resolution. We do support our fire chief, and we would like to see this pass. Just to finish up again, I do commend all of the work that's been done from all of you. Again, the mayor for working directly with METCAD to get that reduction, and if this does go through, continuing to work with Champaign to get these problems resolved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We have a motion by Jacobson, seconded by Marlin. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Can I make sure I know what I'm voting on here, please, first? So the motion is to override the veto.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
No.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess they have 5 votes, right? That's what they need? Okay, so that's that. That motion passes. Okay, we'll move on. Reports of standing committees, the Committee of the Whole. Ordinance number 2015-10-106, an ordinance amending Schedule J of Section 23-183 of the Urbana Local Traffic Code prohibiting parking at all times on certain streets, Philo Road.
Move
Public
approval.
Works. Oh, I'm sorry. Got a little distracted. Go ahead, Mr. Madigan.
Oh,
So,
okay, you ready? So, yeah, on behalf of the committee, I would move approval.
Is there any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
That motion carries.
Okay, so agenda item B, I need to recuse myself and would relinquish the chair to Diane.
Okay. On behalf of the committee, I move approval of ordinance number 2015-10-107, which is an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 3, Section 3-41, Chapter 14, Section 14-7, regarding the Schedule of Fees subsection liquor licenses, and it establishes a Class MB microbrewery liquor license and fee.
I would like to comment on that.
Mayor Pressing?
Yeah, because after after the committee of the whole, you asked that we have two separate licenses. One, if you're only a brewery and do not serve the alcohol. So I've recommended a $50 fee for if you are serving and a $500 fee if you're just a brewery, because you have to go through all the licensing paperwork. And if you're already paying a license, we thought, why not just have it be $50? Because all the paperwork is already being done on that license, the background check and the whole thing. So that was the recommendation, which was in keeping, I believe, in what your intent was. But if you don't like those numbers, you can certainly change them.
Charlie, did you have a comment?
Well, yeah, I was going to say is the motion is just says MB, but we need a motion that says MB1 and MB2 liquor licenses, I believe. So if that's the motion, I will second it.
Are you proposing an amendment?
Well,
That's what's in front of you.
In front of us is a revised version of the statute, and it's MB1 and MB2 now.
Okay.
It's halfway through the packet.
Correct.
There's a cover note from our attorney, Mr. Simon. So if the motion is to you know, to do this revised version that's been come up with this last week, then that's what we should be voting on. All marked up. Yep.
I'm still looking at the ordinance. It doesn't say MB1 and MB2. It just says Class MB. So
Oh, at the title.
both the red line version and the unred line version. So
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
we need to change the title of the ordinance as well.
Do we, Jim?
If you look at Section 2, both of the red line and the other, it has a adding to the liquor license classifications, creating a Y and Z. Y for Class MB1, Z for Class NB2. So the
okay.
structure of the proposed amendment includes NB1s and NB2s.
I guess my only concern was to make sure we're moving the right thing, which is the revised version in our packet, and I'll second that.
As a parliamentary procedure, what you would do, if you are so inclined, is to move to amend that which was referred by the committee, amend it to include the revised version, which is before you now, as written, or any other changes you want to make to it.
So,
Well, a simpler way to do this would is to just say establishing classes, establishing Class MB licenses for microbreweries, and that would include both subclasses. Is that acceptable?
I think,
That's a friendly amendment. Yeah.
I think legal counsel has a comment on that.
If you look at Section 1R, which is where these MB licenses would fall within your ordinance, it creates a Class MB. And then it is subdivided into class. First section is Class MB1, and then A is what MB1s are allowed to do. And then subpart or subsection 2 would be MB2s, which are what MB2s would be allowed to do. So I think you are creating a microbrewery and MB ordinance, which provides for two separate licensures. And the structure follows more or less like the gaming hall G1s and G2s because of the separate fees.
Eric.
So I'm trying to understand the practical impact of this on a business person. So if you want to establish a microbrewery, under any circumstances, it's going to cost you $500. Well, because there are, I'm wrong about that? Okay, tell me how I'm wrong. Where did I go wrong?
One class is for breweries that want to manufacture whatever beer, ale, malt-based products, wine, or other fruit-based products, I assume, like hard cider. Under state law, the single license, though we don't, in this case, have to follow state law because we're a home rule unit, but under the proposed ordinance, they would be allowed to manufacture their alcoholic liquor and sell to other persons who already have liquor licenses, such as bars, restaurants, packaged goods stores. That would be the $500 license.
Right.
If they want to sell their product on their premises to the general public, i.e. non-license holders, then that would be the $50 license, because they're going to, under this structure, would have to obtain either a bar license or a restaurant license if they want to serve food as well. So because they're going to have to pay for either a restaurant license, whether it's a beer and wine only license or not, they're going to have to pay for that fee, or they're going to have to pay for that license as well. And that was, I believe, Alderman Smythe's and the mayor's reasoning for having a much lower fee for those that are going to be selling on premises at retail, as well as selling in package form.
But what I'm looking at Section 2, the definitions of MB1 and MB2. And MB1 is microbrewery to manufacture, store, inventory, and sell to other liquor licensees. MB2 has all of that in there: manufacture, store, inventory, sell to other liquor licensees, and then adds to sell to general public for consumption on or off premises in conjunction with a separate class of liquor license. So it seems.
Excuse me, go on.
Yeah, so on the face of it, it looks as though the $50 fee lets you do everything that the $500 license fee does, plus.
Licensees.
You are correct with one, but you have to remember, if they want to sell at retail on their premises, whether it be for consumption on premises or consumption off premises, i.e. the latter being in package form, they're going to have to apply for a second license, which is, I don't know what they are, $2,500 to nearly $5,000. So they're going to, those companies are going to have two licenses: the $50 license and either a bar license, whether it be full spirit bar or a wine bar. Now, there is one company, and I won't mention the name of the company, that has a completely different business structure. As I mentioned last week, I was not involved. CD did not bring us into the early discussions on what these folks really want to do or how they're structured. But there is one fairly local, well-known brewery that has a parent company that is not licensed at all, and then has a subsidiary which handles the manufacture of the product. They have that kind of a license, what would be equivalent to our MB license. They have another company which operates a restaurant at which their alcoholic beverages are sold. They have a restaurant license. They don't need a manufacturer license because they're just a restaurant that sells alcohol, including the product that's made by the sister company. Again, if that was the situation, then maybe we wouldn't need the two-tier, but this allows for either approach.
Okay, so just to be sure I absolutely understand this. So if the MB2, the $50 license, adds to your ability to have a bar license or restaurant with liquor license, it adds the ability to manufacture, and that costs you $50.
If you want to look at it that way, if you look at
Well, if I were going into business, I think I'd look at it that way.
Yeah. If you look at subsection 2, paren C, in the event that the licensee intends to make or produce food products in a kitchen for service, or no, it would be D, excuse me, I misspoke. Applicants for Class MB2 license must either have another class of liquor license other than a Class MB1 or apply simultaneously for another class of liquor license other than an MB1, i.e. they have to apply or already have the bar or the restaurant license.
Okay, I think I understand it now. Thank you.
Charlie?
And basically, this lets them pick what kind of bar they want to have, whether it's, just beer, wine and beer, hard liquor.
Sure.
It gives them a range of choices, and so it's much more flexible.
Any other comments? I think we've cleared up the fact that this Class MB covers both types of licenses, so we're good to go. All those in favor, please, or do we need a roll call? Okay. Do we need a second? Okay. Seconded by Charlie.
Okay, so who made the motion? Diane made the motion on behalf of Mike. And then you're making the second?
I'm
Okay.
seconding it.
So would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
You're not
Mr.
done yet.
Madigan, are you
Okay,
back?
Diane.
No, you're not done yet.
Oh, you're not?
No,
What
what
do we
you've
have to
just
do?
approved is to amend the language that was sent up by the committee. Now you have to approve the ordinance as amended.
Okay.
I move approval as amended.
Second.
Motion by Smythe, seconded by Jacobson. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes, we're going to make sure this one's doubly approved.
That carries. Mr. Madigan.
Okay, thanks. I'll take the chair back. All right, so agenda item C, ordinance number 2015-10-108, an ordinance revising the fiscal year 2015-2016 annual budget. The committee of the whole voted to recommend approval, and on behalf of the committee, I so move.
Second.
Motion by Madigan, seconded by Smythe. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
Mayor
That-
Pressing?
Yes, that motion carries.
Okay, ordinance number 2015 dash, 2015-10-109, an ordinance amending Chapter 15 miscellaneous offenses and provisions. Sorry, I lost my place. Article 4, offenses affecting public health, safety, and decency, Division 3, nuisances, Section 15-80, aggravated public nuisances. The Committee of the Whole recommended approval, and on behalf of the committee, I so move.
Second.
Motion by Madigan, seconded by Smythe. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
That motion carries. Reports of special committees. I don't believe we have any. Reports of officers. Anyone? Okay, new business, a staff appointment for fleet manager, Tony J. Arnold.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, motion by Smythe, seconded by Jacobson. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll? Did you want to say something first? Yes.
No, I just want to introduce in the front row is Tony Arnold. He's been with us 20 years, and he'll be, our recommendation anyway, is to replace Larry Frederick, who will be retiring soon.
And he's very well qualified, so glad you're here to be appointed. Would the clerk please call the roll? Or no, this is just a voice vote, sorry.
Yes.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. It is unanimous, so thank you very much. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.